For Homecoming Crossing the Bridge to the Soul. It's been so many of them. They all kind of cross-faded together. Her name is Dr. Amy Robbins. I'm going to be speaking about life, death, and the space between. My exact kind of guess. Center of Light. I am now working on an audio book for Homecoming Crossing the Bridge to the Soul. I'm doing the voices. It's a lot of fun with this great microphone. The quality is just out of the wazoo. I'm really enjoying this. I'm playing many different characters. I'm playing the character of Spirit, playing the character of Keith. When I go to India, I'm going to play, thank you, Saidam. I'm going to play all these different characters, having a lot of fun. This will be out in about less than 6 months, I would believe. Recording, it's very, very tedious. I mean, you got to record, find the right one, cut, move, record, find the right one, cut, move, and you have to create this energy and this. It's a lot. So I just posted the link to Homecoming Crossing the Bridge to the Soul, which is now a bestseller. It went to number 6 in the UK. I'm not sure how it's doing now. I am just such a busy guy. Really, really busy. So let's get down to Center of Light Radio Beeswax. Let me post the link for my guest tonight. Please go walk all over her page and make a big stinking noise and let her know that you exist. That would be like really, really cool. Let me do a couple of shuffles here. All right, let me tell you about my guest today on Center of Light. I'm getting everything ready. Dr. Amy Robbins. There we go. Dr. Amy Robbins is a clinical psychologist, spiritual intuitive, wellness speaker, and host of the hugely successful podcast, Life, Death, and the Space Between. Dr. Robbins helps awaken and transform people by using the wisdom of death. Boy, her and John Robinson would get along fantastic. While there is real sadness and grief around loss, Dr. Robbins makes death palpable, yet approachable, and truly believes that dissecting death from a spiritual perspective, we can start to really live life. By starting with the end in mind, we can become more open, clear, conscious, calm, and connected to not only what is happening here, but also to our guidance from the other side. Welcome to Center of Light, Dr. Amy Robbins.
Thank you so much for having me, Keith.
Yeah, how are things going with you, dear?
I can't complain. Kids are back in school. My life is...
Oh, you really can't complain now.
In school with quotations, whatever version of school this is. But at least I have some predictability.
I get that.
Whatever that means these days, right? We're grabbing at whatever we can to give us some sense of predictability.
I'll take a crumb anywhere I can get it.
I'm with you. Me too.
How did this all start for you, sweetie? One of the few questions I ask my guests, usually 3. The first one is, you're an adolescent, child, whatever age you were, and where were you in your life when all this spiritual woo-woo stuff started to enter into your stream?
So I come from a family of pretty conventional people. My grandfather is a pediatrician, family of doctors. And when I was 18 years old, I lost my aunt. She was a diabetic, and she was waiting for a kidney and pancreas transplant. And in order to make sure that she could receive the transplant once she came up on the list, they did a checkup and had found at the time that her heart wasn't strong enough to withstand the transplant. So they brought her in to do surgery, and when they got in there, they could not get her heart restarted, and she died on the table. I was a freshman in college at the time. It was really the first real significant loss that I had experienced. I had great grandparents who had passed away, but this was really, one of those out of order deaths. She was 48 at the time, young, had kids, and so it really shook me to my core. Fast forward about 5-6 years later, I was in graduate school, and my cousin, her son, was getting married. And shortly before his wedding, I had what I thought was a dream at the time, but I now know was a after-death communication. It was an after-death visit where she came to me, and sort of the most profound thing she said to me was, I saw a picture of, like, in my mind's eye, of my mom standing at her kitchen sink, kind of loading the dishes, crying. And she said to me, tell your mom she's going to be there. She doesn't need to be upset. Tell your mom I'm going to be there. She doesn't need to be upset. I will be there. And so I, of course, called my mom the next morning. And I remember when this ended, feel like this visit, feeling like I wanted more, like I wanted to hold on to it. And called my mom the next morning. My mom said to me, I shared with her what I experienced. My mom's response was, last night I was standing in front of the sink talking to Linda, and I said to her, I wish you could be here. And her response, and crying. And so the exact vision that I had been shown from my aunt was exactly what had happened. And there were other things in the course of that visit that also happened that I shared with my other loved ones. And so this started to open me up to what has now been about a 20-something, because I'm not going to date myself, but I'm going to tell you my age, 20-ish year journey that has unfolded over time with loved ones who started coming to me, and then patients, loved ones who also started coming to me in the same way. And once my patients' loved ones started coming to me, I felt like I needed to get some understanding of what was going on and really get a grasp of what was happening. And so that was kind of my spiritually transformative experience, really, that opened me up and has shifted my entire worldview.
A lady by the name of Stella Steele, excuse me, was my editor for The Divine Principle. Brilliant she was, but she was a bag lady, and she loved the role. And she passed away shortly after the book was, no, before the book was released. And when I found out she passed a few nights later, she came to me sitting on my chest, grabbing my shirt and waking me up consciously inside the dream experience. Sitting on my chest, of course, that's Stella. She's just grabbing me and shaking me and say, boy, wake up. And I said, wow, how was it? What are you doing? She says, oh, it was a crazy ride. She said the swirling about within the vortex on the way back was this and that. And she says, I love being here. She was an only child. In fact, all of her family, everyone was gone. She was last. She says, no one accepted me on the earth. I like being here. I can be exactly the Stella I want to be. How does this look to you? How does this look to people in this clinical practice?
You know, for a while, I never said anything about it. I really kind of kept it to myself. Anytime something would come up in the practice or come up for my patients, how I would use it was never as if they were coming to me like a medium. I would say, you know, I wonder how your dad might have felt about that, or what do you think how would you think your father would have responded? What do you think your dad would have wanted you to learn from his death, even though it was pretty clear to me, you know, what was happening. And so it's been a slow rollout, you know, for years. I never spoke about it. Obviously, then I launched this podcast, and now I talk about it all the time. And honestly, there are some people who are very, you know, curious, and I don't ever do readings in my sessions. My sessions are psychotherapy sessions. They are not medium sessions. I really don't do readings in a formal sense. But I think that my patients have definitely opened up and become curious about this world. And I think that part of it is because they know me and they trust me, and they, you know how I work clinically. And so this doesn't feel to them like, you know, frankly, like, what is this woo-woo shit she's bringing to me? It feels always very grounded. And for me, that's always very important, is that it does feel very grounded in, you know, scientific practice, research. A lot of the people I interview on my podcast are people who have scientific backgrounds, because that's where I come from, and that's how I come at this. But I mean, I think people have been way more open than I thought they would be.
I think, in fact, it's probably 3/4 done, and as well as scientifically, the science field, practicing science. I mean, scientists. I think the whole thing is just turned over. I think that we're integrating the consciousness of what this platform and what your life is about into a mainstream in such a way that it's so prevalent now. If you're not privy to this, you are so way behind. This is the train has left the station.
Right. And I think there's so much we don't know. Right. And so so while I can only speak to my experience, right? This was my reality, this was my experience. What I want people to do is to open up and be curious and to not just shut down the fact that this isn't a possibility. There's lots of people who've reported experiences like this, like hundreds of thousands, if not, perhaps millions of people who've had these experiences, but don't talk about them because they're afraid that someone's going to think they're crazy or they're going to get some label on them. And, I say there's not a difference between sort of a psychotic experience and a transformative experience. I think, we have to be careful there. But I also think that be curious, be open, think about what's out there. There's so much we don't know.
Right. And it's like one of those stars you see in this background here is what we know compared to the entire scope and bandwidth of what is really not out there, but actually in here. I mean, when you do your nightly journeys like I do, I mean, if you can become conscious in this space of this reality, you know that there's infinite possibilities that simply await you. And this is one of the things that gets me going as to why I'm a spiritualist in the first place, is because I love going to the cosmic internet and to go to these cosmic web pages and see what's happening in this particular site. Does this happen to you quite often?
In terms of what specifically?
Astral travel or being visited by deceased loved ones or anything of the sort?
I think not the astral travel piece. I've never experienced that. The visits look different now. Like the way that I kind of think about them is more from like a clear cognizance perspective, like just the soul knowing of things that just feels very clear to me. So it's not necessarily in the same way that I experienced it, however long I experienced it ago with my aunt when she first came to me. Sometimes that will happen. Sometimes it will seem fleeting. But it's more just kind of this deep-rooted connection with something that feels much bigger than I am and much, much, frankly, calmer than this world is. And I think when you can connect to that, you can be in the world with a sense of ease and trust and knowing that it's going to be okay. And so that's the shift. It doesn't necessarily feel like it's this connection of something outside of myself anymore. It feels very much integrated into who I am, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I'm all about integrate. Once you integrate something, it's there forever. It's default. It's automatic pilot. Let me ask you this. How our soul contracts and life review can help to inform our choices and decisions?
So, yeah, soul contracts and life reviews. I'm assuming your listeners know soul contracts and life reviews are.
I would think many of them do, but if not, share it with them anyway.
Okay. So this concept of a soul contract is these contracts that we make with our guides, with our masters about what we are going to experience in our life in a physical body. So, some people call them our birth, like our soul plan, our soul agreement. They're called all sorts of things. And I think that contract and we have to be able to deal with that. I think, my aunt's experience is a perfect example of this. I was plagued by tremendous anxiety for the earlier part of my life around achievement, a lot of perfectionism. And I think that my fear and my gripping of life when she died even got stronger. It was like, if I didn't do everything just right, what happened to me would happen to her. And through a lot of therapy and a lot of my own work, I was able to let some of that go. But I think the spiritual piece of it that got tied in once she came to visit me, and I realized, like, when you die, your physical body dies, but your soul lives on. Your consciousness lives on. That I was able to really embrace life in a different way because I wasn't scared anymore. And I wasn't scared that something was going to happen to me. And if it did, I knew that whatever happened, I would be okay because I had all of these outside energies supporting me in that way. So I think that one way a soul contract can really help us is to think about what keeps showing up for us in our lives, whether it's issues around money, whether it's issues around or abundance or scarcity, whether it's issues around relationships, trauma. There's all kinds of ways that this shows up and has shown up in our lives. And I think what's often hard for people to understand about soul contracts is that you if you believe this, then you believe you contracted whatever happens in this life. And I get that that's really, really difficult for a lot of people to swallow, because it's like, why would I have agreed to some of this?
Yeah, and it's to them it almost sounds like predestiny. So you have two things compounding each other. No one wants to feel like that they got to follow a script. I'm sure that in fact, I know, like you're saying, soul contracts. There is a script, and you can't get off of this track. You're going from New York to California. That is a fact. Now you can take some side roads. You got some choices involved here. Would you say? But however, this plan is going to unfold as the staple or the momentum behind you as to why you were born. So in other words, you're going to reach this destination regardless, but you got a little bit of wiggle room.
Right. And I think that that's really important for people to know and understand, is your wiggle room is where free will comes in, right? It's like, what are the choices that you are going to make to continue to grow your soul? And when I think about growing your soul, I think about more soul qualities like trust, like truth, like kindness, like virtue, like self-love. How are you working towards achieving those things? And so that's where choice comes in. It's like, do you see yourself, as we think about moving from 3D, someone who is a journeyer, and what are you learning in your journey? So you would ask me about soul contracts and life reviews. So life reviews, and they cross over. There's a quick period. It's quick for them, but I think time doesn't exist, right? Like time is a social construction. So when we think of this, it's a matter of an instant, but it basically goes through everything you experienced in your life, but you experience it from the perspective of the people with whom you were in relation to. So people who you helped, people who you hurt, you're going to get that. So I'll leave that up to your listeners to determine, what that means to them. But to me, that means like, do unto others. The golden rule it's coming for you. So think about that. And I really use that every day. And I'm not saying I'm perfect. I am far from it. Sometimes I get really angry, and I, say things to my kids I wish I didn't say, or to my husband. But I also try to use that concept of a life review as a real guiding principle in terms of, okay, how can I maybe repair or heal any type of damage that I've done, that I'm going to feel what this feels like, and I don't like it. So
dig it. How do we begin to tap into our intuition and plug consciously into the soul?
Oh.
Any suggestions?
I think there's so many ways. And I think it's important for people to know, from my perspective, there isn't just one way to do this. I think nature is a great place to start, whatever that looks like. If it's, sitting outside and letting the sun beat on you, if it's watching the wind move the leaves, if it's watching waves in an ocean, if it's walking on the ground, it doesn't matter. Nature is just a great way to connect. Meditation is obviously a great way to connect. I think anything having to do with water is a great way to connect. So taking a shower, I find that's a really good place sometimes where you can clear. It almost feels like, obviously there's the physical washing away of, but it often feels like there's sort of a spiritual washing away of, and you really have an opportunity to connect in that way. Dancing, movement, there's so many ways that we can connect that we can get grounded in our body and then connect to what's higher, to our higher selves. And be quiet. You cannot connect when you're busy running in a million directions. It's, rarely happens because you're not conscious, you're not aware, you're on autopilot. When you can slow down enough, that's where you can really connect.
Would you say part of that noise in the head is the monkey trying to convince a person that there's no reason to trust here? In fact, instead, doubt. In other words, one of the biggest obstacles, I think, for many people is simply trusting. They're practicing intuition expansion, right? I'm practicing my intuition expansion, right? And they get a nice, solid, big, round, bold hit. It is truly, they open up the gate and they get a hit. And they go, well, I'm not really so sure I need to believe that. Well, I turn on the radio and there it is. So I think they would lean into that level. But one, many people don't believe in intuition, or at least to the level you and I are speaking about. But two, they probably don't think they deserve it. That's why they're always in doubt mode and mistrusting what they receive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and deserving is interesting, right? Because where does that come from? That, I'm not worthy of being okay in this world, right? And so a lot of that comes from early messaging. Some of it could come from kind of ancestral trauma carried out through generations of what it means to be worthy and what it means to deserve. But this really is a birthright, this knowing, this intuition. We block it. Kids are amazing at this. I mean, I'll never forget when my daughter was little and we were not yellers in this house, in my house. And I remember one time I was changing her and I needed wipes or something. And I yelled down to my husband and her response was like such a startled experience. And I remember thinking at the time, wow, like on some level, she knows that that's not okay, right? I mean, it probably scared her, yes. But there was also like a fear of like, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel loving to me. And so I think that we, as we get conditioned, our intuition gets conditioned out of us. Kids inherently they know who's safe. They know who feels good to them. If you watch them, you can see them, they're careful, but typically they're open and loving. And then probably around 6 or 7, maybe even 8, that intuition starts to get squashed out of us and we start to not trust ourselves because everything, all the noise, right? Exactly what you're talking about. All this noise starts to play in and we start to doubt. Other people's voices start to come into our head about what's right and wrong and good and bad and okay and not okay. And we lose our way.
Yeah, intuition. My son is really good. For me, it wasn't so well when I was growing up in South Louisiana. They come from the old world, the old world. And I think one of the most dangerous words is the word no. The reason the child picks up this piece of china on the table that came from great grandmother is because the child believes it belongs to him, because it does. It's a divine birthright. It belongs to the child and he wants to touch it. And we slap the hand and we say no. And that creates this terrible, terrible rift, this rip between the child, and it creates a second personality, actually. And from that stage is when the child begins to see himself as separate from the grandiose of the experience. Would you agree with that, dear?
Mm-hmm. And I also want to say, like, I've said no to my kids, and so I think that it's a balance. And I think that while I strive to be more integrated, I also recognize that I'm human and that I can't always be that way. And so I think that part of my evolution and continued evolution is to continue to work to integrate these concepts in my life and be better with them. Not perfect, but better. And I think that we can get to a point where we're so hard on ourselves for not being, I was angry or I said no or I did all of these things, when really it's not about like not doing them. It's about, okay, what can I learn from that? what can I learn from every experience in my life, and how can I move to be a more conscious person from there?
How can we use the knowledge of what happens when we die to help us get more comfortable with uncertainty? And that applies across the board for everything. How can we use any knowledge to help us with uncertainty? But in this regard, for the life-death process, how do we take this knowledge and put it into application and to use to where we go, I'm not so scared anymore?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, how relevant is that question now, right? I mean, we are dealing with, like, everything feels so uncertain. We started this interview and I said, at least my kids are in school, so I have school in quotes, so I have something predictable. I know where they're going to be every day. But I think that life is really about accepting uncertainty. There is no certainty in life if we really think about it. And I think that, from a psychological perspective, we defend against that. And when we defend against it really strongly, what happens is an excessive need for control, which can result in anxiety, because we are trying so hard to have certainty in something where there is none. And so thinking about, okay, well, we don't know when we're going to die. And it sounds a little bit trite. People always say, like, live each day as if it's your last. And that's hard to do. I mean, it really is. But if you can live a part of each day thinking about, like, if this was my last interactions that I were to have with these people or the people I love, or thinking about, like, what am I doing today to contribute to the greater consciousness in a positive way? Because we know that all of that raises vibration, right? And it raises our vibration and it raises the collective vibration. And so there isn't certainty in life, and that's really hard to accept. But I think when we get to the point where we know and trust, this goes back to intuition, where you trust that no matter what happens, you will be okay, then you can really move to a place of truly living your life, because you know that no matter what happens to you, doesn't mean it won't be hard, doesn't mean it won't be painful, doesn't mean you won't have difficulty, but you don't have to suffer. And there's a difference.
Huge difference. Suffering is self-induced. Pain is walking in a house and not knowing someone bought you a brand new piece of furniture as a surprise and the light's off and you break your toe. That's pain.
Yeah.
Now, what you do from that point with the pain can be self-induced suffering. Have you noticed that? I think you said something that resounded this just a little earlier, and maybe even so buried in your last point. Have you noticed that the people who are most afraid of death really don't have a fear of death? They have unconscious regret that they are not allowing themselves to live.
Oh, sure. I mean, I think that a fear of death absolutely prevents you from living. I mean, it is, if you are fearing death all the time, then everything you do, consciously or unconsciously, is driven by the fact that at any moment you could die, right? And so you don't live because, is this something that is going to kill me? And it could kill you physically, but there's also psychological death, right? I mean, not living can be a psychological death as well. And so I think to think about that, like, not only are you afraid physically, and so you're not living your life for doing certain things because of fear of a physical death, but where are you limiting yourself psychologically? Where are you not putting yourself out there? Where are you not taking risks psychologically because of fear of shame, because of vulnerability, because of fear of what other people will say, of judgment, of all of those pieces? So, I mean, this is obviously very complex, and everything kind of, is woven together. And that's why we can't separate psychology and spirituality. They are, the most spiritual thing you can do is to know yourself. Right?
And it does require the mind, the psychology, to have the faculty to understand even if it's a small percentage of what the spirit actually is. So you can't really understand what the spirit is until you understand the small puny self. How are you going to ever understand the majesty and the royalty until you understand that you just but a pawn?
Yeah, and it's like, it's so unbelievable, right? We can't wrap our minds around it because we're trying to wrap our minds around it as humans, trying to imagine like a spiritual being or my aunt sitting with me or all of these things in human form. And it's not, it's energy. And so, I mean, I don't understand quantum physics, but I'm dying to try to understand it because I know there's something there, and I knew that there was something there when I was, in my 20s, and my grad school professor was talking about quantum physics and string theory, and I remember her saying that and being like, ooh, sounds like there's something there, but I'm not really sure what it is. But I think that we try to put language to things sometimes that there isn't language for.
And sometimes language just gets in the way.
Mm-hmm.
That's going back to talking. That's going back to the noise in the head. There's so much happening in silence that surpasses everything that happens through dialogue. Because if you can get really good at the language of quiet, you never need to speak again. Though you might want to for entertainment and hang out with your friends. But there is so much more happening in silence than there is in utterances, would you say?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and in the silence is the knowing, right? Like that's when we're quiet enough to really know. And when people, I mean, I try to meditate every morning. Some days I'm better than others, but I can tell you when I do, and I just ask whatever questions I have, and then I'm just quiet. It might not even come to me in that quiet moment, but it will come to me at some point during the day, some sort of answer to the question. And it might show up for me in all different kinds of ways. Sometimes it's through clear cognizance and just knowing. Other times it shows up in the world in a physical way. But I always get the answers that I need when I ask the questions.
So for those out there, tonight my guest is Dr. Amy Robbins, and we're speaking about life, death, and the space between. Most people are expecting intuition to come in with this big booming voice. Here is your guide for today, Sagittarius. It can. Someone may knock on your hiney if a spirit guide really needs to get your attention, but that's not the purpose of it. The purpose of it is to feel and be like you. So you're being supported from the very beginning to be yourself, because it's already trying to integrate in you as you. And since we're talking about the space in between, what is truly the space in between, and how do we begin to embrace that?
So for me, the space between means a lot of things. It sort of came out of really me feeling like I was living in this space in between for so long, the space in between life and death, psychology and spirituality, this mediumship woo-woo world, and a really grounded psychotherapy practice. And I think and the space between death and whatever comes after that. And so I think that that's the piece that we need to embrace, is like, what is your space between? Where are you living? What is the pieces for you that are making you kind of question and wonder, like, okay, what is this? Where are you most uncomfortable, and can you lean into that? Because that is really,
that's the door.
Our space.
There is no other door. That's the door. The door that awaits all of us is finding ourselves through being uncomfortable. Because if we stay in comfort, we just sit here and complacent, and we don't ever expand. So that place that you swore in your soul you would never visit again, the place that you swore in your soul a person would never visit again, in you, the uncomfortableness is the liberation itself. Moving through that awkward feeling thing, that impression you receive from childhood, is where your liberation lies. So you can't go over it, you can't go around it. You have to go through it. And when you okay your way through that door, you expand. and then you get to another level of the game, and then you expand and you get to another level of the game. It's always about pushing down the walls, or actually realizing that there never was any in the first place. But uncomfortability is pointing to that's intuition. If you're uncomfortable with your intuition saying you are a divine sovereign being, why in this God's green earth you are not comfortable? That would be a good way to peg intuition that's telling you, what is this mirror effect? This is me. So who is this me that's having this experience that says, oh my God, please don't make me go through that thing again? That's the voice of God. That's intuition saying, I'm sorry, but you have to. If you ever have any intentions to come home and be with me, this is the path.
And we have to experience discomfort. I mean, we're humans. That's sort of the deal, right? Like, you can't come here and just expect everything to always be comfortable, because that's not really how you grow. How you grow is in that zone of discomfort and pushing yourself past that and through that.
We're going to take a short pause real quick. We'll be right back. Lavender Soul is going to play a pretty song for you. Keith Anthony Blanchard here, speaking with Dr. Amy Robbins, and we're speaking about life, death, and the space between. Going to be right back. How about some Angel of Love?
She turned to me and told me life was not too easy unless you can let go. I lay surprised at the simpleness of her soul. Wasting away in a sea of uncertainty. She had stayed with me for days. I needed love in so many different ways. And as I watched, she floated through the room. And as I cried, she was there to dry them too. Hold me and don't let go. Hold me. Never leave. Never leave. Angel of love, will you always be with me so I can let go? Reveal to me the beauty of your soul. I turned away, her light was so blinding, the energy of her love. She said goodbye and turned into a dove. As I watched, she floated through the room. unless you can let go. Reveal to me the beauty of your soul.
Welcome back to Center of Light. Keith Anthony Blanchard here. Yanava, the name's under. Right there, Yanava. Heart, clear mind, strong backbone, strong like bull. Get things done in this life. Coming to the end of the presentation, interview with Dr. Amy Robbins. We're speaking about life, death, and the space between. What does the end of our life tell us about us right now?
What does the end of our life tell us about right now? I would like to think that what it should tell us is we shouldn't have to wait till that point. And I think a lot of people do. And I think that I like to think every day, or at least like, if not today, kind of what are my long-term, hopefully long-term thoughts about when I get to that point, will I have lived as much as I need to live? And will I have done what I need to do in order to succeed? And I don't want to say succeed, but in order to be at peace with how my soul grew while I was here.
Buddhist monks, they actually go into a meditation and they don't get out except to do it. They have to use the restroom if that happens because they eat very little food, so they are able to stay in. They literally bring themselves to the point of death in this meditation. I forgot what it's called, the ritual is called. But they bring themselves to the point of death. And at that point, they can truly make a choice to not return or go back. I would strongly suggest anyone move into the field or the art of doing what you love. Find who you really are, be it meditation, because when you do what you love, even if your eyes open, it is a meditation. You are aligned with purpose because that's your purpose. We call God purpose and love. So when you do your purpose and you love it, then you are aligned. And then intuition naturally just flows into your consciousness. And there is no debate about, am I receiving intuition that I need to act on? Or because you are the intuition because of the flow of purpose and love and life and light that is existing in you. Would you leave us with a final thought, but as well, for my listening audience who are really digging this interview with you,
Sure.
share with them everything, how they can find you, YouTube, your radio show, your website, events coming, whatever it is you want to blast out.
Awesome. Thank you. So my podcast is called Life, Death, and the Space Between. You can find it anywhere you can find your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, any of those places. Hit subscribe. You'll get it every week. I do 6 podcasts a month, so it's a lot of juiciness. My website is dramyrobbins.com. I'm on Instagram mainly at Dr. Amy Robbins, and I'm also on Facebook, but not really on Facebook. So if you go on Facebook and I don't respond to you, it's because I'm not really on Facebook all that much, even though I know they're the same platforms. And if you do sign up for my newsletter, what I've been doing in my newsletter every week is I do what I call soul wisdom, which is I sit in automatic writing and do sort of channeled insights. And at that time, that's sort of when you can get some wisdom that I believe comes from my own soul and my own kind of higher knowing. So that's a little fun thing that I do each week that you can receive if you sign up for my newsletter. Oh,
Leave us
one
with
more thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm also working on courses. So those will be coming out hopefully in the next couple months. So I'm really excited about what those are going to be and how those are going to look.
Leave us with a final thought, please. Grace us with one. Bless us with one.
My final thought when you were talking about purpose, and one of the pieces that came through just when I recently did some channeling was more about essence. So that essence, the essence of who we are, is really what is aligned with our soul. And that when we can tap into our essence, that's when we can really live out what we're supposed to live out in this lifetime.
Dr. Amy, thank you for joining me here on Center of Light Radio. You're welcome back anytime, darling.
Thank you. I loved it. I'm happy to come back, answer questions, whatever you want.
I will send you a finished. It's finished now, but I'll tighten some things up for YouTube, and you're welcome to use that link if you need, or just like it, post. But my wall is your wall. Feel free to use it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Keith. I really, really appreciate it.
Blessings. Everyone, Keith Anthony Blanchard, Center of Light, Yanaval Spiritual Technologies. You got to look inside, man. We've been looking outside for so long. It's boring now. In fact, it's lost all of its luster. For me, I'm done with the outside. I mean, I love the outside. I love being human. Being human fully is divine in and of itself. I will be seeing you, I think, this Thursday night. Sylvia Isaacson is going to be here, and I think we're going to be doing readings, and she is phenomenal. She never told anyone, never. And all the radio shows she's done, she's never told anyone. She announced that on Center of Light Radio. And this lady is a stick of psychic dynamite. I will sing you guys really soon. Center of Light Radio, Keith Anthony Blanchard, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 7 p.m. Central Time. And none of it means anything without you. Just know, my friend, you are loved. I'm looking for my outro screen. I got to do a lot of cleaning up. Either way, I'll just disappear. Peace, love, and light.